Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, you porcupine, you. This is Eric Brakey, your host, your renegade statesman and executive director of the Free State Project. Welcome to episode 19 of the Porcupine Report, where we bring a new episode to you every single Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m., broadcast on all your favorite platforms. You can find us on the Free State Project Facebook and X and YouTube pages. You can find us on Spotify and all your favorite podcasting apps. And wherever you are catching this show right now, it would mean so much to me. It would be so helpful if you liked or retweeted or shared or left a positive review, whatever makes sense for the platform that you are consuming this show. It makes a big difference for helping us to reach new audiences and to spread the message of liberty. So thank you in advance for doing that. I really appreciate it. And we're going to have a great show today. Our guest I'll be introducing in a little bit is someone who's been around the Free State movement for quite a while. But before I get to him, let me tell you, of course, we are now in the month of June, which means that the Porcupine Freedom Festival is almost here. In fact, it's less than 2 weeks away. I hope that you've gotten your tickets because you know I have been telling you every single week that you need to go to porcfest.com and get your tickets while supplies last. All of our tenting sites are already sold out, but we still have RV sites available, which you can tent at an RV site, but you also get access to a nice electric outlet. So, and there's also hotels and motels in the area too, for those of you who don't want to sleep outside. But that is going to be June 17th through the 23rd at Rogers Campground in beautiful Lancaster, New Hampshire, you know, right under some beautiful mountains. It's great scenery. This is a family-friendly freedom festival. Now, this actually will be the very first Pork Fest. You know, so much of us are lovers of the Ron Paul Revolution, but this is going to be the very first Pork Fest that we're going to hear directly from Dr. Ron Paul. He's going to be delivering a virtual message to folks at PorcFest this year. We've got a giant, massive telescreen set up for him that he's going to be zooming in on, but there's also going to be opportunity for question and answer. So please be sure to bring your best questions for Dr. Paul. But that's not all. Look, you get to go camping with 2,000 of your favorite libertarians. And here's a few of the names of folks who are coming. Spike Cohen, Naomi Wolf, Chris Martinson, Jeffrey Tucker, Gene Epstein, David Friedman, James Bovard, Lily Tang Williams, William Ruger, Peter Earl, Kelly Vlahos, Jacob Hornberger, Jack Hunter, Martha Bueno, and so many more, including not one, but two Soho Forum debates. Look, this is not to be missed. So bring your friends, bring your family, and reserve your campsite while supplies last. Grab your tickets at porcfest.com. That's pork with a C, not with a K. If you go to porcfestwithak.com, I don't know. There's maybe you'll find some barbecue. You won't find that family-friendly freedom festival you're looking for. Porcfest.com before everything sells out and before you run out of time. Just 2 weeks to go. All right. We're going to hop into the show, everyone. Our guest today is Mark Warden. I think he goes on X as Liberty Warden. I guess he's a Warden of Liberty. He's a board member for the Free State Project. He is the founder of Porcupine Real Estate, helping so many folks who are coming to the Free State in search of freedom, finding their forever home. He served 4 terms in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, which is one of the largest legislative bodies in the world with 400 members. So we'll be certain to be talking about that. And an interesting fact that I learned, both as a legislator and as a realtor, he has been a trendsetter with cryptocurrency. He was the first candidate in New Hampshire to accept Bitcoin donations. And he was the first realtor in New Hampshire to sell a house for Bitcoin. This was all the way back in the early 2010s. So he's a man ahead of his time, and he's here with us today. Mark, welcome to the Porcupine Report. Glad to have you with us.
Eric, it's great to be here.
Well,
I'm getting excited about PorcFest after your introduction. I'm glad I have my tickets because sometimes it sells out. So it's going to be a fabulous festival this year.
Well, what are you looking forward to at PorcFest this year?
It's tough because it's overwhelming. There's just so much to do. There's so many great speakers, some of whom you mentioned there. And what I really look forward to is seeing people I haven't seen in a year. It's like a reunion every June in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, just to catch up, see how the kids have grown in the last year, and then plot more government takeover for the future. So it's a combination. I tell people it's like a combination of Burning Man and the Mises Institute. But
I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's come to PorcFest many years over time. And she was telling me how it used to be, she loved coming to PorcFest because it was just like one big party, and that's what she loved about it, right? But now that she's a little bit older and she's got kids now, and her husband's coming to PorcFest, they're bringing their kids to PorcFest. They love the fact that there's so many families there now. People have grown up. They're bringing their kids. We have Porcupines, which is our programming for the non-adults. And but for those who are just interested in having a party with a bunch of libertarians, there's all of that. But there's so many different ways to choose your own adventure at PorcFest. There's something for everyone. If you love liberty, if you love statism, maybe it's not for you. You can go somewhere else.
And this year there's going to be a little bit more of a focus on live music acts. We have those every year, but they've recruited a lot more professional musicians to come out this year. So plenty of really good music, as well as camping and talking politics and playing Frisbee down in the fields, whatever you want. You'll find something to love at PorcFest.
All right. Well, if we haven't sold the audience enough, I hope now they realize that they need to pause this right now and go get their ticket at porcfest.com. They can pause it. I mean, I guess if they're watching it as it's broadcast. Well, anyway, they should just go get their ticket. I'll forgive them if they miss a chunk of this, if it means they're getting their ticket for PorcFest. They can always come back and watch the rest later. So Mark, you've been a participant in the Free State Project for quite a while now, but you originally came from Nevada. Tell me about your experience in Nevada, because you were involved with the Liberty Movement out there, and what led you to leave Nevada and come to New Hampshire.
Yeah, I consider myself sort of a late bloomer and adopter of the libertarianism philosophy. I didn't even know about it until my mid to late 30s, and I was living in Las Vegas. Somehow stumbled across the Libertarian Party of Clark County. So what's this? Let me go check it out, and went to a couple of meetings. And I spoke with those people and heard their thoughts on the world, politics, culture. I realized that it really spoke to me, and that's what I was. That's how I felt in a lot of these things. So then they just kind of sort of red-pilled me and started giving me all these books to read, like Ayn Rand and Economics in One Lesson, and all the other required reading for libertarianism. And it really spoke to me. So I jumped in, helped the LP out there quite a bit to promote their candidates, and I even put my own name on the ballot one year as a Libertarian Party candidate.
What year was that?
2000.
Okay.
There was a big push for 2,000 candidates in the year 2000 by the LP, and I said, I'll sign up for state senate. I knew it wasn't going to win, but I raised $15,000, put a lot of signs out, did some door to door, put a lot of flyers out just to try to talk to people. But I quickly realized after that experience that you just can't win in the third party. It's like banging your head against the wall. So 2 years later, after that, I ran for state assembly. It's called the Assembly of Nevada as a Republican. The people from the Republican Liberty Caucus recruited me and said, Mark, you got to stop wasting your time with the LP. Come to our side. And I mounted a good campaign actually, but lost in the primary. But I realized that there was no place for a super small L libertarian, such a liberty-focused person in an establishment. So that's when I started thinking about other opportunities. And about that same time, the Free State Project was rolling out. So this would have been 02, 03. I heard about it in the LP News, which is an old print newspaper they used to mail out once a month. There was an ad in there, and I just loved the idea of concentrating a lot of us in one small state. And as much as I love the desert and the heat, and don't like the snow, I said, I'm going to do it, and moved out in 2007.
Wow. You know, it's funny. When I think of Nevada and the Liberty Movement, I think about, I remember so many folks who were active in Clark County in the Liberty Movement with the Ron Paul campaign in 2008 and 2012. I remember, I wonder if any of the folks who I served as a delegate with at the national convention, any of these folks may have been, folks that you worked with back in the day. But I remember there being Nevada ended up being one of the strong states for Ron Paul back in the day. So maybe you left your mark there.
They do a good job out there. In fact, parts of Nevada are very libertarian leaning. Most of what they call the cow counties out there, or the rural counties that aren't very well populated, are really just leave us alone, don't mess with people, don't hurt them, don't take our stuff. They're that way, but all the population is concentrated in the two areas of Las Vegas and then Reno, Tahoe in the north. And the unions dominate out there, and they get their way in politics. But the rest of the geography of Nevada is very libertarian leaning.
Yeah. So you made your move to New Hampshire, and you've certainly made your mark on the Free State movement. How long into your move to New Hampshire did you decide to run for the state legislature?
Well, pretty quickly. In fact, it was one of my goals when I first moved here. Looking at the political landscape, I thought it was a very winnable thing. As you mentioned, we have so many legislators in the state that it's fairly easy to get elected if you put out a good effort, go talk to people, go knock on doors, and actually talk to voters. They love that. You have to be here 2 years before you can run for state rep. So what I did initially to plug into the politics scene was join an organization called the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. It's an excellent all-volunteer organization that helps rate the legislators. It gives them sort of a score, a grade from A to F every year based on their votes on a number of key bills throughout the legislative session. They also do training for people who want to go testify in front of a committee at the State House. So it was really invaluable experience going through that, learning how to read the bills, learning how to vet the bills, learning how to influence legislators through emails, personal phone calls, as well as testimony. So by the time I did run for office and get elected, I was already pretty well versed in the process. And most of my other freshmen, when I was first elected, were coming to me for advice on how do things work there in the committee.
Yeah, and for those who want to learn more about the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, they should go back, and we did an episode with Melissa Cream, who's currently the chair of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. They can go back and check that episode out, because they're still doing great work to this very day. In fact, I know that from Maine, I was very jealous of the infrastructure that the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance has built. We had nothing like it in our state in terms of this very, very driven grassroots volunteer effort to rank every single bill in the legislature, on whether it's a pro-liberty bill or anti-liberty bill, grade all the politicians on their voting records so they can be held accountable by their constituents each election season. And it seems like a very effective organization. As the Free State Project, of course, we just focus on getting people to move here, but then there are so many groups for people to get involved with once they arrive, if they want to get plugged into politics, or they want to get plugged into whatever their interest is, however they want to advance the ball for liberty. There's a lot of great groups. But then, so you served 4 terms. Now, I think you said to me before the show, you served 2 terms in the minority and 2 terms in the majority. Of course, I've served in a majority before and a minority. These last 2 years, I was in the minority in the Maine Senate, and it's a lot more fun in the majority, I'll tell you that.
Sure
No, you can have fun in the minority if you don't mind poking people in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some of the highlights from your time in the legislature, and what were the years that you served, just so we kind of get a sense of, what the landscape was like at the time, what era we're talking about?
Yeah, I was first elected in 2010. And you and the viewers may remember that was the
Tea Party year.
Party revolution.
Yeah.
There's a huge groundswell of support for conservative, liberty-minded, and Republican candidates. And we won 300 out of the 400 seats in the state legislature. We haven't even come close to that since 2010. But we had a very pro-liberty Speaker of the House named Bill O'Brien, who really pushed forward a lot of good legislation, helped us repeal some bad legislation. And most importantly, in that 2-year period, when you have to vote on the budget, which is a biennial budget in our state, he actually, through sheer force of will and good politicking, got the finance committees of the House and Senate to actually reduce spending by $1 billion.
Wow. So is that a reduction from the budget the year before?
Yes. It never happens. Not only, we were the only state in the country that actually reduced spending from one budget to the next.
Yeah, I can tell you, that sounds like a miracle to me, because in Maine, it's like we're just like, the conservative goal is like, let's just like, maybe we'll try to have the budget not grow faster than inflation. And even that we fail at. So that's pretty amazing to know that in New Hampshire, the budgets can actually go backwards in terms of overall spending.
Yeah, it was an historic event, and we're all very proud of that moment.
So was in 2010 in New Hampshire, obviously the Tea Party wave was like a banner year for folks on the right across the country. As far as I know, in Maine, it was like the first time in 40 years that Republicans took control of the House, the Senate, and the governorship. Was it? It sounds like it was a particularly big year for the Republican Party in New Hampshire, and there were a lot of libertarians riding in on that Republican wave.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, people just put their name on the ballot as a Republican and they got in if they were in the right district, even if they didn't campaign or weren't that well known. But in New Hampshire, historically, it's a fairly conservative state politically, and throughout the entire 20th century, all the 1900s, every year was a Republican majority. So it wasn't until about the year 2000 where now it kind of swings back and forth between a Democrat majority and a Republican majority. It's been half and half since about 2000. So it kind of goes with the political tide at the time, which way it leans. But
do you have any particular thoughts about why that change has happened?
it has to do with the in-migration, I guess, basically people from the big cities.
Yeah.
A lot of people moved in from Connecticut, Massachusetts, Boston, and New York, bringing some of their liberal ideas with them.
So we're counterbalancing that with the Free State Project.
Yes. Yeah. Come on, we need more movers. So if you're watching this and you haven't moved yet, come visit during Pork Fest and then stay.
All right. So your first term, you guys managed to cut $1 billion in spending from the budget, but that's just your first term. So you served a total of 8 years. What are there any big other big fights that stand out in your memory or policy accomplishments you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, there are a few of them. By the way, I was elected in 2010-12 and took 4 years off and got elected in 2018 and 2020.
Oh, okay.
Idea.
Yeah.
But sort of my claim to fame had to do with a small piece of statute in regards to beer manufacturers or breweries. And when I first got in office, I didn't really want to sponsor legislation, but a great activist named Kevin Bloom, who's a Free Stater, said, "Mark, we got to fix this broken system for home brewers and small breweries in New Hampshire, because there's only one license, and you have to be licensed to brew beer and sell it." Mm-hmm. But there was one license basically based around a big company like Anheuser-Busch. There's a big Budweiser plant here in New Hampshire. And he said, "We need something for the small guys." So we worked hard with Cal Pratt, who was another state rep, and myself, and Kevin doing all the coaching and training of other state legislators on how important this was. And basically, we reduced the barriers to entry. So we dropped the annual license fee from $1,400 down to $300. Which another critical thing was it was illegal or against the law for a small brewery to distribute its own product. You maybe remember this. There's something called a tides system where they were harking back to the era of prohibition in the 1930s. They were afraid of vertical integration, so they wanted to separate distributors from retailers from the manufacturers. We said that's nonsense. A small microbrewery should be able to distribute its own beer instead of having to go to a third party. Because the third party is going to be incentivized to push the Budweiser, whoever their big brands are, who does the most business. We also got rid of the requirement that the prohibition on selling beer on tap in your own brewery. So basically we got rid of these barriers to entry, and it was fantastic. After this worked its way through the legislature and the new regime came out and the licensing schemes that were so much easier to get into, there was an explosion of all these microbreweries. They're so-called nano breweries in New Hampshire. And like 65 or 70 licenses were issued in just the first few years. And of course, now you go to any grocery store or beer shop, and you see more than you can ever try of these craft brews. The craft brew industry has really exploded in New Hampshire because of that one little bill.
I've heard actually a lot of people talking about this. I didn't realize you were the person to thank, the legislator to thank for helping to make this happen, because I know, I mean, I'll tell you, my wife and I I was kind of ashamed to admit this when I lived in Maine, but we had like a favorite meadery, Moonlight Meadery in New Hampshire. I remember kind of going in there, and I saw it was on the wall or something, just a brew free or die, and asking people about that. And there were people talk about, how the law changed, and it just kind of you had all this freedom with microbreweries and small business creators of alcohol just kind of growing up overnight. So that's awesome. I guess I didn't know we had you to thank for that, Mark. So I'll give you thanks for that. I will say that that part actually was a big sell for me in making the decision to move to New Hampshire, so I could be closer to some of my favorite my favorite places. So
fantastic! Well, I think the more people that watch this episode tonight are going to recruit even more to move here.
So when you come to New Hampshire for Pork Fest, be sure to on the way, stop by some of the local microbreweries and pick some stuff up. And bring it with you to Pork Fest. In fact, buy extra. Bring it to share with all the new friends you're going to make. So that was in your first two terms. So that you said 2010 to 2014. You took 4 years off. I know what that's like. I took a few years off between terms myself. What did you do with your time outside the legislature between terms?
Well, I got to be super busy with the business that I was building. It's a real estate business. I did real estate out in Nevada before moving here, sold homes for new construction for builders and developers. But when I first got to New Hampshire, I realized there was a need to have somebody who could sort of speak the same language as other libertarians that are moving here. Yeah. And I got to know the entire state, got to know people all around the state. I was one of the first, I think, 200 or 300 movers. So back then we used to all know each other. Now there are over 6,000 of us, so you can't know them all. But I thought there was this great need to be able to offer a sort of concierge moving service for fellow libertarians and free staters moving from out of state to New Hampshire. So I studied up and got to know everything I could about the state, the different districts, the different towns and zoning and things like that, and built a residential real estate business that caters to liberty-loving folks, free staters, conservatives, ANCAPs, and anybody who wants less government. So people love it when they're moving from Massachusetts or New York or California, because they're used to being such a small minority, and they're afraid of talking to their neighbors about crazy ideas like not masking during COVID or having a gun, things like that. So I like to welcome them. Sometimes I'll even open carry during showings when I'm showing real estate, just to kind of blow their mind and and say, this is it. Welcome to the free state. And I also help direct people to find towns that have, let's say, more relaxed zoning rules. Or if I know they want to run for office in the future, like people like you and me, I'll find a good district in which they might have a better chance of winning in the future.
Yeah, well, I know for me, I've my wife and I just found a place, and we're going to be in Dover, which is not a good place to run for office as a Republican. So I think actually that'll help me kind of make sure I actually do take a break for a little while to catch my breath, but probably not forever. Maybe I'll. Maybe we'll be in the market for a new home in a couple of years, and we'll see what the future holds there.
Yeah, we'd like to rope you back into the game. Like you, I consider myself a Ron Paul Republican. There's just so many of us here that we've created a freedom caucus, if you will, in the state house of 75 or 80 people strong. So it's really a force to be reckoned with, and I hope we can get you back in there one of these days.
Yeah, one of these days.
Okay.
Give me a few years. So you took four years off. You built your business, and then you went back. You said in 2016, and you served for another 2 terms, 16 to 20. What were those 4 years like? And what liberty work did you get up to during that time?
I was involved in a number of different things. One was to change the process of civil asset forfeiture. I'm sure you're familiar with the process wherein law enforcement, they think that you've been involved in some criminal activity, such as selling drugs.
Right, but they never have to prove it. But
they can take your stuff. They can seize your car. They can seize the cash in your trunk. They've tried to seize a hotel, just even without ever prosecuting you.
Yeah, so, I think the Institute for Justice calls it policing for profit.
Yeah.
and in many states, I don't know what it was like in New Hampshire. In many states, like the police agencies that seize that forfeit your property get to actually keep the proceeds, and they get to use it for their own purposes. So talk about a bad incentive structure.
Yeah, it's a horrible process. So we needed to improve that and increase civil liberties in the state. And we actually had a lot of help from IJ, Institute for Justice. One of their attorneys came out a number of times to testify and help educate the legislators here. But it took 3 terms. It took 6 years of different legislation and education towards the committees. Dan McGuire was instrumental in one of the terms. Michael Sylvia was instrumental in another term. Each time we had to sort of tweak the language in the legislation, but it took 6 years before it finally passed. But IJ was thrilled. They were a big help, but they have a rating of all the states and on the policing for profit, and we went from down here to up here, one of the top tier states because of it. But it's a long grind. Another thing I was interested in, of course, is cannabis legalization. I don't even do cannabis, but it's a very important thing for libertarians. So in one of the early years, I just put in legislation to basically remove the term cannabis or marijuana from all the criminal statutes. The idea was to treat it like tomatoes. That was my pitch. You should be able to grow your own tomatoes in your garden, give them away, sell them, eat them, consume them yourself. So it was trying to push the Overton window, all the way over, and also keep people off guard because I'm a Republican. I claim to be a conservative Republican. I'm certainly conservative fiscally. So you get some double takes from your own party, and then you get some double takes from the Democrats. And okay, what's this guy really trying to do here? That didn't go very far. I think it passed the House by 1 vote, but it just died quickly in the Senate. But again, it pushed the Overton window, and it's a long trudge of the long war or battle of trying to get that cannabis legalized in the state. We did get it decriminalized, I think up to 1 ounce, which is a good step. But we're not towards full legalization yet.
I know that's a battle that's still being fought, and I know it is. I will say this is one of the hard parts for me as someone who, one thing I can brag about Maine is like how far Maine has progressed in terms of cannabis legalization for medical and adult use, and I've done so much work on that over there to cross the border and come back to a state where it's still, as you mentioned, it is decriminalized. It's not like when I say it's a prohibition state, it's not, it's not like the worst eras of the prohibition regime that we imagine, but it does seem like the state Senate has continually been a roadblock to cannabis outright legalization. And I will say, I think one thing Maine had going for it on this front is the legislature was never interested in legalizing cannabis, but we have a referendum process in Maine where the people voted to legalize it, and then the legislature had to figure out how to deal with that. But of course, referendums are a double-edged sword. A lot of very bad policies also have been passed in Maine by referendum. So I guess if you have to make me kind of pick one, I guess I prefer a state without a referendum process, but with a big populist legislature like the New Hampshire House has. But I guess, the New Hampshire Senate did just pass, I'm told, for the first time ever, a cannabis legalization bill. But I guess there's a huge fight between the House and the Senate right now about how to do it. I guess the Senate and Governor Sununu want, I guess they call it a franchise model, where it's like it's very top down, government controlled, and I think people are concerned that it will lead to kind of private public monopolies of the industry versus the House favoring a model that sounds very much similar to kind of how we have it in Maine, where you have much more of an open marketplace where small businesses can get in and compete. So I guess it's yet to be seen what's going to happen there. Have you been following that? I guess as someone who's been who was involved with it during the legislative process back in your day.
Yeah, a little bit. I thought the legislation that came over from the House was acceptable, and I was disappointed to see that the Senate scuttled it and made it more restrictive. I wasn't really surprised, and I doubt the House will have the appetite to agree or accede to the Senate version. We'll know in the next week or two, but
yeah,
I think that it's too much of a, like you say, it's too much state-run, too much like a state-run oligopoly to allow a certain number of franchises. As a pro-free market guy, I just think it's a terrible way to go.
Yeah, and I know some people would say, well, let's just get it passed. Let's just end prohibition and we'll try to make it better in the future. But of course, I'm also sympathetic. Some people have pointed out that, well, if you set it up wrong to begin with and you kind of have these public-private monopolies, you've created a very invested and entrenched special interest group that is going to fight to keep things the same and to keep their monopoly over the industry. And so maybe it is better to wait and to do it right down the road. So I suppose folks in the legislature will make those decisions. It's certainly, they'll have to decide, I suppose, how they want to set it up. But it is an interesting fight to watch. So that was in your second two terms. So I'm curious, how did you, 2016 to 2020, so this is just like as Donald Trump is serving his first term. I know for myself as a libertarian Republican, I found it in some ways, I felt like it was easier to kind of carve a place for myself in the Republican Party when Barack Obama was president, because it was easy. Everything he was doing was like the opposite of liberty. So it was easy to kind of rally Republicans in a libertarian fashion when there wasn't a clear Republican standard bearer. And we were all kind of fighting for, what does it mean to be a Republican and how to define it. And I wanted to find it as Republicans believe in liberty. But you were coming back in, during Donald Trump's first term, and there's some things, to like about him, some things not to like about him from a liberty perspective. How did you navigate that time period in the Republican Party?
For as long as I've been involved in the Republican Party, there have always been these factions, the so-called establishment Republicans and your Liberty wing or your Freedom Caucus wing of the party. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. In the beginning, other than 2010, which was really an outlier, in general, we were a fairly small group of liberty-minded, small L libertarians in the House. But it's continued to grow every 2 years. And now, as I mentioned, it's 75 or 80 people.
Yeah, and almost a quarter of the whole body.
That's right, and it's just under 50% of our caucus. I mean,
Yeah.
so we throw our weight around quite a bit, and you can't, establishment leadership can't just do what they want without our blessing.
Would
So
you
that's
say that?
been a real bonus.
Would you say that it's the biggest single faction within the Republican party? Not obviously, it's not a majority of the Republican caucus there, but I mean, 80 out of 200 or so. That's unless all 120 are unified for the establishment.
And they're not. They're probably 50 or 80 who are establishment. And then there's that squishy middle that kind of go either way depending on who makes the best argument last.
Yeah.
But it continues to grow. And then during the COVID, this is another really interesting thing I remember in 2020 and 21 was the ridiculous nonsense of social distancing. We had because we were elected in 2020, and I think one of the first meetings we all had, we were out in a parking lot. People had to be in their cars listening over the radios to the speakers. And then I guess this was in 2020, so we'd been elected in 2018, and we were finishing up. We had to flash your brights to vote in the parking lot. Another time we held our state the session inside a hockey arena at UNH. So people would spread out all over the hockey arena, and they'd bring in technology where people could vote on a little buzzer, vote yes or no. And then finally we settled inside this indoor sports arena that has 3 soccer fields under one roof, and people could socially distance, and the chairs had to be 5 feet or 8 feet away from one another. And it was so surreal because all the Democrats were masked. They were on one side of the field. And then sort of next to them, there were some Republicans who were masked and social distancing because they were, I don't know, whatever. But I don't know what they thought. Maybe they were concerned about their health, legitimately. Yeah. Then you had the Freedom Caucus on the other part, and we're totally unmasked. We're up shaking hands, hugging each other. We move our chairs closer next to each other so we could sit and talk. It was just so surreal, and it's unbelievable. I was glad that we were doing the people's business, but I hated that because it wasn't right to be in a soccer field. We should be back at the State House, but the Democrats were suing the Republican leadership to keep us out of the State House, and they wanted to do remote voting and all this nonsense. So that is another thing I'll never forget.
It's amazing, especially now, of course, Anthony Fauci was just in front of Congress, and they're asking him, so where did this 6 feet rule come from? And he's just, it just kind of appeared, and he takes no accountability for it. There was ever any scientific basis for it, and they pretend that they weren't imposing this on everyone. But I mean, it is weird to look back on it. It feels a little bit like a dream that we all just kind of woke up from. And it's like, did that really happen? Yeah, it did. And it really, I think, showed us something about the character of the society the character of our government, certainly, and how people can be ruled by fear. But I suppose that's a playbook used by tyrants for thousands and thousands of years, is ruling people through fear. It was so you decided not to run again in 2020.
I was just so overwhelmed with work. It was hard to do both. Even though it's like a part-time job in the house. If you're in the house, it depends on which committee you're on as to how many hours it might take. But if you're doing a good job and you're involved, you might put in 10, 15, 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
From January through May or June.
For $100 a year.
$100 a year. Yeah. So it's a labor of love, and it's nice that we have a citizen legislature. Most of the people in it are retired, so they have the time. But a lot of us are working stiffs, people with day jobs. So we scramble to work around it. And in between votes, we'll run back to our computer and send off an email or make a call. And then they give you good Wi-Fi wherever you are there. So if you need to take care of work, you can. But it was my business was just going crazy with so many people moving here, especially during the COVID lockdowns and COVIDian nonsense. We had all these people who could now work from home, they were just rushing towards New Hampshire. So I needed a break from the legislature to handle all the new business.
Do you think you might ever go back?
As a matter of fact, I'm filing tomorrow to
Oh,
run,
all right.
yeah, as a candidate. Yes, I was arm twisted into putting my name on the ballot for state rep. It's a slightly different district than where I was elected previously. So I'd say my chances are slightly better than 50-50, but I'm going to give it a shot.
All right. Well, we'd love to see you back in there. I still have so much to learn about New Hampshire politics. So maybe once I'm settled and have officially made the move to New Hampshire, and I'm gonna have to spend some time at the New Hampshire State House and get a sense of things. Hopefully, I'll see you up there, and you can show me the ropes.
That'd be great.
Well, and I know you are also helping to recruit candidates for this cycle as well. So I didn't realize that you'd recruited yourself as a candidate, but you're also recruiting other candidates. I know that there's, I imagine it's a challenge when you got 400 different seats that need to be covered. In Maine, it's a challenge. We got 151 House members. That's difficult enough to recruit folks for all those seats. But you got 400 in New Hampshire. Plus, I still don't fully understand it. You've got all these. It's like different towns have multiple seats, but everyone represents the entire town. But then there's these things called floating districts. I don't understand any of it. How do you recruit for a system as complicated as this?
It's difficult. You need a lot of different people and groups helping out on the recruiting effort because the party can't do it all. There's a fairly high turnover in the House. Every 2 years, it's about a third, which is what 133 people leave of the 400 every 2 years. You're first trying to scramble and fill those. Then after you find candidates for those where you lost all your incumbents, then you got to try to fill the other spots where you maybe have a fighting chance against and coming from the other party. But over the years, we've just continued to do that to some friends of mine, and I've filed a PAC. So we raise money every year to help our candidates. We do a lot of training, campaign management, how to talk with voters, how to knock on doors, help them design their literature and their signs. And I just got to beat the streets. All the social media avenues we have available to us, whether it's Facebook or Discord or X, we're out there talking to our affiliated groups, our like-minded family groups, to try to get them to run for office. It's not easy, but we do some cajoling and persuading and arm twisting and make promises we can't keep to try to get them to run.
All right. I know it's I know if it's anything like recruiting in Maine, you always have to tell candidates, don't worry, it'll be easy. We'll help you so much. You won't even have to lift a finger. And then you get them to sign on. It's like, actually, now you got to go knock the doors. We told everything we told you about how easy it was going to be.
Yeah,
that was a lie just to twist you into it.
Same thing here. And over the years, we actually got a number of Democrats elected too. There were some free staters that I guess you would consider them left libertarian, let's say.
Yeah.
And I think 5 that I'm aware of that we worked with and helped and supported and got elected over the years. Unfortunately, most of them went to the dark side and they were quickly outed by their party as just not being team players. And there's a lot of peer pressure on the Democrat side to go lockstep and do whatever the top management tells you. It's a lot different on the Republican side where we can't be influenced that way. We have our Liberty Caucus, our Freedom Caucus. We're not going to be bullied, but they're very much into strong arming on the Democrat side. So a lot of the good people we thought would be really pretty good Liberty votes quickly showed their colors and went to the dark side. So now I pretty much just help Republicans file, and I'll take people from Libertarian Party if they want to come over to Team Red, change their voter registration. We'll show them the way to victory.
It certainly has been an ongoing debate for quite a while in the liberty movement of, if you want to be politically effective, should you join the Republican Party or should you be, in the Libertarian Party? And I guess we've seen this debate a lot recently with the LP convention that just took place in Washington, D.C. And I know that a lot of folks out there, some may be watching this right now, were very involved in maybe the Mises Caucus efforts to come in and kind of make the Libertarian Party more resemble the Ron Paul Revolution, and maybe feel a little disappointed about how things turned out. But if they're looking for a new strategy to actually be effective and advance the cause of liberty, certainly the first piece of advice I would give is maybe you should move to New Hampshire, where there's a million different ways to be effective. And if you really want to be effective in politics specifically, I mean, in New Hampshire and other states, but nowhere as much as New Hampshire, libertarians have been very effective at colonizing the Republican Party, and making it a liberty party, and pushing the neoconservative authoritarians. They can go join the Democrats, or even better yet, my personal dream, I know this is a pipe dream, but maybe one day all the left libertarians and the right libertarians who are arguing on and on at the Libertarian Party convention about what direction the LP should go as they move on to get 3% of the vote one way or the other, that they would all just, the left libertarians would go colonize the Democratic Party, the right libertarians go colonize the Republican Party, push out the neoliberals, push out the neoconservatives. They can go start their own party. They could call it the Authoritarian Party, and they can argue at their conventions every 2 years on who the real authoritarians are as they get 3% of the vote. Anyway, I know that that's a bit of a pipe dream, but a more successful effort, I think, than just being in our own little third-party camp where we're not a real threat to the people in power.
And certainly we want people who are big L, capital L libertarians, or even if they identify that way and they support the party, move to New Hampshire and then run in a non-partisan election. Right?
Yeah.
Run for town planning board, town selectmen, city hall or city council, school boards. Those are non-partisan elections, so they don't know your affiliation. That's a great opportunity for our fellow libertarians.
And let me be clear for all of the people who are really, really committed to being big L libertarians and being part of the Libertarian Party, that we absolutely want you to come to New Hampshire too. And in fact, I just got word this week that the secretary of the Libertarian National Party is considering a move to New Hampshire. So would be so glad to have her, and all big L and small L libertarians. Come join us in the Free State, where we're actually concentrating and building a Liberty Homeland where you can actually make a difference.
Yeah, those guys are certainly good people and friends of mine. And at PorcFest, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, the LPNH puts on a great party. So I'll be bringing some craft beers, some Nano Brewery craft beers there, and celebrate all the good Liberty wins we had, however we get them.
Awesome. Hey, Mark, we're getting towards the end of the episode. I want to give you anything we haven't discussed, any last words you want to share with folks before we wrap things up?
We will remind viewers that besides PorcFest, there's a great event in February or March of each year called the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, nhlibertyforum.com. We encourage people to visit in the winter, see what it's like, realize you can survive the snow and the cold. And it's a bit more buttoned up than the camping festival that is PorcFest, but we encourage people to check that out, or just come for a visit any time. And we have, we being the Free State Project, has a group we call the Welcome Wagon. We're happy to arrange a lot of people for you to meet while you're here. If you want to meet some affiliated people with similar interests, whether it's knitting or sports or mountain climbing or politics, homeschooling, we'll introduce you to the right people, sort of curate those introductions and make you feel right at home. So visit fsp.org, check out the Welcome Wagon, check out Liberty Forum, check out PorcFest, and fall in love. All
right. Come and visit for a week, and perhaps you just might stay for a lifetime. Mark, thank you so much. I really appreciate it's been a pleasure so far getting to work with you. I know you and I were both at the recent Welcome Wagon helping a new mover move into Dover. Apparently he's going to be my neighbor, not too far away from where I'm moving into later this year. And I know there's another Welcome Wagon coming up coming up soon too. It's like every week there's another new mover that we're helping to bring in. So keep them coming, I say.
Yeah, I love it. Also, I have my website back here, porcupinerealestate.com. We also have some resources on there for people thinking about moving to New Hampshire. A lot of information about the schools and the taxes, how it works, the zoning laws. So check it out. You can find us on Facebook at Team Porcupine Real Estate. And I'm on X or Twitter at Porcupine Mark. So love to connect.
All right. Thank you, Mark. It's a real pleasure having you on. All right, everyone. That's the show. Let me remind you one more time. I know we've been reminding you throughout the whole episode. So if you haven't gotten this in your head yet, maybe you're a little thick. But I'm gonna, we love our thick libertarians too, as well as our thin libertarians. So I'm gonna hammer this in. Get your tickets to Porcupine. Get your tickets at porkfest.com for the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Okay, got a little tongue-tied there. All right, porkfest.com. Grab your tickets. Mark also mentioned the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. We had a great New Hampshire Liberty Forum earlier this year. I will say I just actually had a good call today I'm talking with some potential producers for the New Hampshire Liberty Forum for next year. So we are in the early stages of planning. I guarantee you that's going to be excellent. So certainly do have that on your radar for February of next year. But for right now, get your tickets, porkfest.com. Don't miss out. I'm not going to read the list again of all the names of all the great libertarians who are going to be there with us. But right now, the only libertarian I care about being there with us is you. So get your ticket. Come join us. PorcFest 21. Yes, the 21st PorcFest. It's going to be excellent. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you to our technical producer, Raynita. I will tell you, Raynita was like the Lady Liberty at the LP National Convention. She was there as a delegate of the New Hampshire Libertarian Party, and she was wearing on her back at one moment the Appeal to Heaven flag, reminding everyone there what we are fighting for. We are fighting for our rights bestowed upon us, inherent to our humanity. If you believe in God, bestowed upon us by God, which no government has any right to deny to us. Our right to life, to liberty, to the pursuit of happiness, no matter how much these state apparatuses, particularly our national government, tries to deny it. You have the right to live free, and in the free state, you can do just that. So join us, come visit us for PorcFest, and maybe come make your forever home here as we build our homeland for liberty. All right, everyone. Furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed. I'll talk with you all next week.